It was supposed to be a day of celebration, but it turned into the worst nightmare a mother could ever live through. July 1985, Disneyland, California. Two Chinese twin girls, just 12 years old, Mariana and Liliana Chen, vanished under mysterious circumstances after taking a photo with Mickey Mouse. Their mother went to the bathroom for no more than 7 minutes, and when she came back, her daughters were gone. It was like the ground had swallowed them whole. What really happened that day in the happiest place on Earth? Why did the police investigation fail so badly? And how could two little girls disappear without a trace in the most heavily monitored amusement park in the world? After 28 years of complete silence, the workers digging at a construction site made a horrifying discovery that revealed a truth darker than anyone could have imagined. Two small skeletons buried right next to Mickey Mouse's head in an abandoned sewer. They finally told their story. This is the investigation that uncovered one of the most disturbing cases in Disney's history, where magic turned into horror, and justice only came after nearly 3 decades. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss stories like this, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. This all happened on July 15, 1985, a day that should have been perfect for celebrating. The twins, Mariana and Liliana Chen, had just turned 12, and their mom, Fernanda, had planned their dream trip to Disneyland in California. The family had moved from China 3 years ago, looking for a fresh start after the tragic death of the girls' dad in a factory accident when they were only 4. Fernanda worked double shifts at a textile factory to afford this special trip. She had been saving every year for months, knowing her daughters deserved this happiness after all the pain. The twins looked identical, but they had totally different personalities. Mariana was more outgoing, while Liliana was shy but super observant. They both had unique hairstyles with 2 yellow hair ties, wearing pink shirts under short kid suits and white sneakers that Fernanda had specially bought for the occasion. The park was buzzing with the usual summer day energy. Families from all over the world mixed in the games and activities, creating a symphony of languages and laughter. The twins ran from one game to another, their eyes sparkling with the kind of magic only Disney can create. Fernanda followed them with a smile, capturing every moment with her camera. Kodak was perfect. Everything seemed just right until the moment that changed their lives forever. Around 3 in the afternoon, the 2 little girls asked to take a picture with Mickey Mouse, their favorite character. They had been waiting all morning for this moment. The employee dressed as Mickey seemed friendly, making exaggerated moves that made the girls laugh. Fernanda took several pictures, not knowing they would be the last photos she'd ever take of her daughters alive. Then, an urgent need forced her to go to the bathroom, and she made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The employee dressed as Mickey assured her he'd take care of the girls while she was gone. For a few minutes, trusting in the magic of Disney and what seemed like a safe place, Fernanda hurried to the nearest restroom, thinking she'd be back in less than 5 minutes. When she returned, she'd only been gone for 7 minutes, but the spot where she left her 2 daughters was empty, and the employee dressed as Mickey Mouse was gone too. At first, she thought the girls had moved to a nearby area, but a quick search around showed no sign of them. Panic took over as she ran through the park, shouting Mariana and Liliana's names. Other visitors noticed how upset she was right away. Many Disney employees rushed to help her, and park security was immediately notified. A search protocol was launched, which included temporarily shutting down several rides. Initial interviews revealed some worrying information. Several witnesses reported seeing the twin girls with Mickey Mouse employees, but no one could identify who was actually under the costume. The park employs dozens of people playing Mickey in different shifts, which made it hard to figure out who had been with the girls during the initial confusion. Anaheim police were called at 4:30 p.m. when it became clear the girls wouldn't come back on their own. The officers started a thorough search of the park, questioning employees and checking off-limits areas. But the huge crowd and the place's popularity that day made the investigation really tough. Fernanda went through a long, emotionally draining interrogation. The investigators had to rule out any chance that she was involved in her daughter's disappearance. Her broken answers, a mix of English and some Chinese words when she was overwhelmed with despair, painted a picture of a shattered mother. The initial investigation went on late into the night without finding any valuable evidence. The days after the disappearance turned into a never-ending nightmare for Fernanda. The police threw all their resources into the search, including tracking dogs. Helicopters and divers were searching the artificial lakes inside the park. Local media started covering the story, sharing pictures of the twins with their innocent smiles and yellow ribbons. The local Chinese community stepped up to help with the search. Volunteers handed out flyers with Mariana and Liliana's photos at restaurants, shops, and community centers. Language barriers became an extra hurdle since many potential witnesses felt uncomfortable talking to the police because of their immigration status. Disney fully cooperated with the investigation, providing employee lists, work schedules, and security camera footage. Back in 1985, surveillance technology was pretty limited compared to today's standards. Cameras were mostly focused at entrances and exits, with very little coverage in the areas where the twins were last seen. The person dressed as Mickey Mouse who interacted with the two girls was never identified. Several employees who played that role that day were questioned, but all had solid alibis and passed lie detector tests. The investigation mainly focused on the possibility that someone used an official costume to trick the girls. After 3 weeks of intense searching, the evidence started to run dry. The police expanded the search area to include nearby places like hotels, shopping centers, and residential neighborhoods. They checked guest records, questioned hotel staff, and reviewed security camera footage from the surrounding areas, but found nothing concrete. Officially, the case of the twin girls, Toshin, was declared a missing persons case after 6 months with no real progress. Fernanda rejected this label and insisted her daughters were still alive somewhere. She became obsessed, turning into a relentless investigator. She scoured California from north to south, following every lead, no matter how weak. Several factors hindered the police investigation back in 1985. Criminal databases weren't connected like they are today. Communication between different police departments was slow and often ineffective. On top of that, the temporary nature of many amusement park employees made it hard to track down people who might have been involved. Years went by with no news. Fernanda developed severe PTSD but refused to seek help from any specialist. Instead, she poured all her energy into keeping her daughter's memory alive. Every year, she updated the flyers and used digital projections to imagine what the girls might look like as they got older. Every year on July 15th, she would religiously visit Disneyland to mark the anniversary of the disappearance. Over time, the local Chinese community started losing interest in the case. Families had their own struggles, and time has a harsh way of making even the sharpest pains fade into the background of collective memory. Frenda found herself more and more isolated, staying alert only for the sake of her two missing daughters. The media would sometimes cover the story on the anniversary, but the updates were always the same. No new evidence, no developments, no hope. The case was officially closed in 1995. After years of being off the radar, even though technically it stayed open, by 2010, 25 years after disappearing, a new generation of detectives had taken over at the Anaheim Police Department. Detective Mikel Rodriguez, who specializes in cold cases, decided to review unsolved files from the 1980s. What caught his attention was the meticulous documentation that Fernanda had kept all these years. Rodriguez found out that Fernanda, now a 68-year-old woman, had kept up her own investigation with unwavering determination. She had developed her own theories about what really happened based on her findings. For decades, her apartment was like an impromptu command center filled with maps, photos, and newspaper clippings covering every surface. Modern technology opened up new possibilities for the case. DNA evidence, linked criminal databases, and advanced investigative techniques offered clues that weren't available back in 1985. Rodriguez started digitizing case files, creating a database that allowed him to cross-reference info with similar cases. An interesting development came when Rodriguez discovered several other unsolved child disappearances at amusement parks in California during the 1980s. Although there were no clear links between them, The similar pattern suggested the possibility of a serial predator operating in that area during that time. At first, Frenda was hesitant to cooperate with the new investigation. She had lost trust in the authorities after decades of empty promises. However, Rodriguez's persistence and genuine interest in the case gradually convinced her to share her personal files and theories. In March 2013, when building a new subway line in Anaheim required extensive digging in areas that hadn't changed for decades, workers were digging near an abandoned drainage system about 2 miles from Disneyland. When the suspects crashed into something unexpected, the project supervisor, an experienced man named Frank Morrison, immediately noticed that the objects that appeared weren't just ordinary trash. Amid the rubble and dirt, there were tattered pieces of faded clothing and what looked like small bone fragments. Morrison stopped the work right away and called the authorities. The site was cordoned off, and a forensic team from Orange County was called in to carry out a careful excavation. What they found terrified them. 2 small skeletons, clearly belonging to 2 children, along with tattered clothing, matching the description of what the twin girls, Chen, had been wearing. But the creepiest discovery was a partially buried plastic Mickey Mouse head found next to the remains. Investigator Rodriguez was notified immediately. After years working cold cases, he developed an almost supernatural ability to connect seemingly unrelated clues. The fact that the Mickey Mouse head was found near the Disney park made him instantly think of the twin Chen case. Initial forensic analysis confirmed the remains belonged to 2 little girls, about 2 years old. The state of decomposition matched remains buried for decades, and the damp but protected soil helped preserve some pieces of clothing as well. A piece of pink fabric, probably part of the shirts the twins wore on that fateful day. News of the discovery quickly spread to the local media. The sensational headlines talked about the Disney skeletons and solving the mystery after 28 years. For Frenda, who had stayed vigilant for nearly 3 decades, the news was a crushing mix of relief and fresh pain. The discovered bones underwent extremely precise forensic analysis and DNA testing, a process that was impossible back in 1985. Frenda provided her own DNA samples for comparison, and samples were also collected from personal belongings. The 2 personal DNA samples I've carefully kept all these years finally gave results after 6 weeks. The DNA confirmed, without a doubt, that the remains belonged to Mariana and Liliana Chen. After 28 years of doubt and uncertainty, Frenda finally got scientific proof of what she feared in her heart since 1985. Her father died shortly after they disappeared. The autopsy revealed horrifying details about the circumstances of their deaths. The skeletons showed signs of physical injuries, and the position of the bodies suggested the 2 little girls were confined in a tight space. Preserved tissue samples allowed for further investigation. There were signs they had been sexually abused, confirming the worst fears about what they went through in their last days. As for the Mickey Mouse head found with the suitcase, it underwent thorough forensic testing. The fingerprints were wiped out due to decades of environmental exposure, but the type of plastic and how it was made showed it was an official Disney piece, probably part of an employee costume from the mid-1980s. This finding supported the theory that the perpetrator had access to official Disney costumes, whether they were a current or former employee. The investigation intensified, focusing on the staff who had worked there. The park opened in 1985, and they had access to character costumes. Rodriguez and his team started building a criminal profile of the perpetrator based on physical evidence and the circumstances of the crime. It involved someone who knew the area well, had a way to transport the bodies, and enough local knowledge to find a hidden burial spot. The renewed investigation focused on a list of Disney employees who worked at the park in July 1985. Even though the employee records weren't complete after all these years, they still provided names and addresses of people who had access to Mickey Mouse costumes, many of whom, the employees had died, but some of them were still living in the area. Important clues came up when investigators found out that several employees were suddenly fired in late 1985 without any clear explanation in their files. One name that caught attention was Robert Bobby Henderson, a 26-year-old guy who had worked as a cartoon character performer for only 4 months before being fired in October 1985. After he was let go, Henderson completely disappeared from sight. He had no official employment records after 1985, and his last known addresses dated back to the late 80s. However, criminal records showed minor arrests for vagrancy. There were reports of disturbing behavior in several cities in California during the 90s. Investigations revealed a worrying background. Henderson was arrested in 1983 for harassing minors in a Los Angeles park, though the charges were later dropped due to insufficient evidence. There were also reports of inappropriate conduct with children in his neighborhood, but no formal charges were filed. Investigators used advanced search techniques, including public service databases, vehicle registration records, and social media to track Henderson's current whereabouts. However, he seemed to have vanished since 2008, apparently abandoning. Using his real name in official dealings, Fernanda, who is now actively involved in the investigation, provided valuable information about strange sightings she had documented during her years of research. On several occasions in the 90s, she noticed an elderly man watching her during her visits to Disneyland on the anniversary of her daughter's disappearance. Her descriptions matched Henderson's physical appearance. After months of intensive searching, investigators finally found Robert Henderson in an abandoned trailer in the Moab Desert, about 200 miles east of Los Angeles. He was living as a recluse, relying on odd jobs and disability benefits, and had drastically changed his appearance. He's now 54 years old, thin, and seems to be struggling with mental health issues. The police carefully planned his arrest, but Henderson didn't resist at all. In fact, he almost seemed relieved when the officers showed up at his door. He'd been living for decades under the weight of his secret, and his mental state had seriously deteriorated. He was dealing with paranoia and frequent hallucinations. The initial investigation revealed that Henderson still had vivid memories of the events from 1985. Under intense psychological pressure, he started confessing his involvement in the disappearance of the twin girls. His confessions were recorded in detail and finally gave Fernanda the answers she had been searching for over 28 years. Henderson described how he tricked the two girls that day, promising them a special adventure away from the crowd. He took them to a wooded area near the park, where he sexually assaulted them before strangling them. He kept their bodies in a temporary basement for several days before burying them in an abandoned drainage system. His confession was confirmed by details only the killer could know, including precise descriptions of the twins' clothes and personal items that had never been made public. Henderson also revealed that he kept a Mickey Mouse head as a gruesome keepsake of his crime. Fernanda was informed of the confession during a private meeting with investigator Rodriguez. After decades of doubt, she finally had answers. Finally, the answers she'd been searching for. But the truth was way more horrifying than she imagined, and learning what her two daughters went through shattered her all over again in a way she can't even describe. Robert Henderson was officially arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Given how much time had passed and the exceptional circumstances of the case, the prosecution decided not to seek the death penalty and instead went for life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Henderson pleaded guilty to all charges, avoiding a public trial that would have been devastating for Fernanda. The sentence was handed down at an emotional hearing where Fernanda finally got to face the man who destroyed her life. In a heartfelt 15-minute statement, she talked about 28 years of suffering and how losing her 2 daughters affected every part of her life. Henderson, who had become physically frail and mentally broken, listened silently. When given the chance to speak, he offered an apology that felt hollow after decades of silence. He expressed regret for his actions, but for Fernanda, no amount of regret could make up for what she had lost. The media coverage was extensive but respectful, focusing on Fernanda's perseverance and the importance of never giving up on the fight for justice. Her story became a symbol of maternal resistance and determination. Fernanda stood strong through the hardships and finally gave her daughters a proper burial. Mariana and Liliana's bodies were cremated and their ashes scattered in a memorial garden set up by the local Chinese community in their honor. The ceremony was intimate but meaningful, giving Fernanda the closure she had been waiting for nearly 30 years. In the months that followed, Fernanda founded an organization dedicated to helping families of missing children. Her personal experience and understanding of the legal system made her a fierce advocate. She worked with investigator Rodriguez to develop improved protocols for handling missing children cases, so other families wouldn't have to face the same neglect. Despite never fully recovering from the loss of her two daughters, Fernanda found meaning in helping others. Her legacy has become a symbol of resilience, justice, and the importance of never giving up hope, even in the darkest moments. If you've made it this far and want to see more stories like this, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new stories. Don't forget to leave a like so we can keep sharing more stories like this. See you next time.